What is basic Medicaid planning? I know lots of you out there have elderly parents, or maybe you're setting something else up for yourself for when you might need Medicaid. And, a lot of people don't get what they think they're supposed to get in the end because they didn't set the planning up the right way. We're very fortunate to have an expert with us today to discuss what basic Medicaid planning is and what you need to do to avoid some of the pitfalls and make it work the way you need it to work. Listen in as attorney Joseph A. Marra explains.
What do I mean by Medicaid planning? Okay. Well, what's the goal? The goal is to get the best possible care, all right, and get the most government benefits while protecting your assets. That's the goal. When people come in for Medicaid planning, do you need Medicaid planning? Well, what's the deal? Today in this area, okay, nursing homes cost anywhere between $10,000 and $25,000 a month. Okay. Now, if you have assets and pensions and Social Security throwing off that kind of income, then you don't really need Medicaid planning. If you say, I want to protect my income, well, you can't, right? Anybody who qualifies for Medicaid in an institution, nursing home, they're only allowed $50 a month in income. So we're not talking about income protection for Medicaid planning for institutional Medicaid. We're talking about asset protection, right? So I want to protect my income. I'm going in, if I go in a nursing home, you can't, okay? You're going to protect your assets. And we'll go into that more in a bit. So what are we talking about here? We're talking about nursing home bills. That's what we're focusing on to start. How are they paid? Well, there's a limited Medicare benefit. There's pay out of your pocket, which is obvious, right? And there's long-term care insurance, and then there's Medicaid, right? So once again, Medicare out of your pocket, long-term care insurance, Medicaid. Medicare. What is Medicare? For those of you who don't know, it's insurance, government health insurance. We all pay into the system. You all are going to qualify for it. When you're 65, you should apply for some portion of it. There are penalties for people who don't, believe it or not, if you don't apply at 65, and that's for another lecture. But what does Medicare cover? Well, first I'll tell you what it doesn't cover. Let's say someone is home and they have Alzheimer's, and they have a caregiver who's taking care of them. And suddenly the caregiver can no longer care for them. And that person, they have no other problems other than they have dementia and they cannot handle their daily activities of living, right? They can't feed themselves, clothe themselves, bathe themselves, but they're otherwise healthy. That person now has to go to a nursing home. What does Medicare cover? Zero, nothing, zilch, okay? Medicare is very specific in what it covers. Number one, you have to be discharged after at least a 3-day stay in a hospital, okay? Number two, you have to be going somewhere for rehabilitation, okay? Very important. 3-day hospital stay going for rehabilitation. Classic situation, person has Medicare, they fall, they break their hip, they go in for hip surgery, they go in the nursing home for rehab. Let's say they're otherwise fine. Once rehab ends, they say, okay, well, you're not benefiting anymore from rehab. They discharge them home. But let's say that same person now, they can no longer feed themselves, clothe themselves, bathe themselves. What happens? Medicare will not cover them anymore. That's when one of the other three options kicks in: long-term care, Medicaid, or out of your pocket. Let's talk what Medicare does cover when it does cover something, okay? First 20 days are in full. There's another potential 80 days, so the maximum coverage is 100 days. There's a copay of $176 a day. But remember, the maximum benefit is 100 days. If they deem you are no longer benefiting from rehab, they cut you off, all right? Some supplemental insurance plans will cover that part or all of that Medicare copay of $176 a day. That's something you should look into, your own health insurance. Are they covering that? So that's basically all that Medicare covers, and it's very limited. Paying out of your pocket, well, that's self-explanatory. You're paying out of your pocket. Long-term care insurance. Well, they're issued by private companies. New York State has this public-private partnership thing you could look into. It's decent rates. New York provides a deduction if you are paying premiums on one of these policies. It's capped at $1,500 a year. This is just New York State returns, not federal returns. And your AGI, adjusted gross income, has to be less than $250,000. Then you'll get a deduction. Some or all of your premiums up to $1,500 a year will be deducted. Okay. Now, what is Medicaid? It's a government program where only indigent are covered. All right. There's community-based Medicaid and institutional-based Medicaid. We're not really going to focus much on, because of time constraints here, already almost an hour up. We're not really focus on it, but New York changed the rules in October. They've now imposed a penalty period of 2.5 years. We'll talk about that when we talk about institutional Medicaid. So just know it's available, but there are very limited income levels and asset levels on that. All right. So now we're talking about the person who, let's paint the picture. Single person, discharged from a hospital. They go for rehab. They're getting Medicare coverage. Rehab expires. Medicare is cut off. They don't have any money. They go on Medicaid. Well, how do you go on Medicaid? What assets are you allowed? All right. And you're going to hear that the asset limit is pretty low. You say, well, I have more than that. How do I plan for it? Well, there are ways of, if you do it far enough in advance, or believe it or not, even if you do it at the last minute, there are ways of getting some Medicare coverage for you. That's if you come out with nothing else. Remember, don't think that, oh, mom's at a nursing home. She's been there for 3 months. Nothing I can do. There may be something you can do. There may be something you can do to protect mom's assets. Always don't think it's too late. It may not be. It doesn't hurt to have a consultation with a person who's an elder law attorney who knows what they're doing. I will tell you, though, in other states, New Jersey, for example, that they're not anywhere near as flexible in New York. New York has very liberal rules, okay? And let's just briefly explain what Medicaid is. It's a federal, state, and local partnership program when it comes to funding, okay? In New York, it's paid 1/3 by the federal government, 1/3 by the state, 1/3 by the county, or in the case of New York City, by New York City. And also the federal statute basically offers the states options, okay? You could pick option A, you could pick option B. I will tell you that New York State has picked the legislation, the most liberal option, meaning the most opportunities for planning. All right, some states like New Jersey don't have as many opportunities for planning. You really have to plan more than 5 years in advance, and I will explain why in a minute, okay? So what I'm going to explain to you now, what I just told you about Medicare is national. It applies across the country because Medicare is national. Medicaid varies from state to state. I'm going to focus specifically on New York law when I'm talking about Medicaid, right? So best way to start is, how do you become eligible for Medicaid? Well, you can't have assets, liquid assets, more than $15,900 in your name. And we're talking right now, institutional Medicaid, you're in a nursing home. You're only allowed $50 a month in income. But there are certain assets that are exempt. Well, in addition to this $15,900, what's exempt? Well, $1,500 burial fund, or better yet, you could prepay your funeral expenses, something everyone should do. Go to funeral home. It's called the New York Medicaid Pre-Plan. I'm not going to go into that in depth. You can pay your expenses. What people tried to do is, well, my funeral's, I bought the plot. The funeral itself is probably going to cost $15,000. I'm going to spend $40,000, and then when I die, my kids can get the rest other than what's spent. No, it doesn't work. Basically, if there's that money left, it goes back to New York State. So you prepay your funeral expenses, and the money is taken care of. So people say, well, all I have is $65,000. Well, might as well prepay your funeral expenses now. And there's other ways of getting down to the 15.9, which we could discuss. Not really the subject here, but there's different planning techniques. Just if you leave with nothing else, know that there are planning techniques. Know that the best time to do it is 5 years in advance of needing nursing home coverage, need nursing home care. You could do it anywhere along the lines. Even after you get in a nursing home, just keep that in mind and consult with an attorney if you find yourself or a close family member in that position. But the better you plan, the earlier you plan, the better. Okay. Now, you're allowed 1,500 buried fund. We talked about that, and you're allowed equity in your home of up to $906,000. Okay, and you're also allowed an IRA. So I'll give you a little quiz. Let's say someone has prepaid their funeral expenses. They bought their plot. They spent $30,000 on that. They have $1 million IRA, and they have a house worth $800,000. Now they fall, break their hip. They're single. They have to go to a nursing home. Can they get Medicaid benefits? The answer is yes, because they have these exempt assets. But it's a little bit of a catch. Remember I told you it's $50 a month in income. So the IRA has to be in payout status, and they pay it out according to your life expectancy. So if you're getting $100,000 a year payout on your IRA, that's going to the nursing home. And basically Medicaid will cover anything above that. So they'll cover like your pension, your Social Security, whatever it is, all of that goes to the nursing home, and Medicaid picks up the difference. Okay. Well, remember I mentioned the house is exempt. There's an assumption in New York, and by the way, once again, this is New York centric, not all states have this, that it's assumed you're going to return home. What if the person has Alzheimer's and they can't walk? Well, they very liberally construe this. They make legal fiction. Yep, we assume they're going to return home. So I tell the family, look, if I were you, if I could keep the house up, keep it. And when the person passes away, sell it. The Medicaid, though, one thing though, Medicaid can file a lien against this house. So why wouldn't I just sell it if they're going to file a lien? Well, here's the reason why. In New York State pays at least 70% of the nursing home bills. And what they do is they go in and they negotiate with the nursing homes. They say, okay, nursing home, you're charging private pay rate, 15 grand a month. We're not paying you that. Typically, they negotiate a rate of 2/3 of the private pay rate. So they're paying $10,000. So as you could see, let's say we follow my scenario. The person goes into the nursing home and they qualify for Medicaid. Medicaid pays for 10 months, then they pass away. And if the house was not put in a trust and has to go through their estate, Medicaid will file a lien. But notice if it was private pay, they would have been paying $150,000. Now the state only has to pay back $100,000 because Medicaid covered it. So this is it's a good thing. It's a tool to be utilized. Some families can't afford that. We can't carry the house. Well, they just have to sell it, and we'll have to do some other type of planning. But keep that in mind. There's some exemptions. If you're married, we'll talk about marriage situation in a minute. You could transfer your house to your wife and they can't put a lien on it, or your husband, as the case may be. If there's a child living in the house with you and qualifies as a caretaker child within the meaning of the law, you could transfer the house to them and there's no lien. So these are all planning techniques we'd go over. And remember we talked about the look-back period. Well, what do? If you're applying for Medicaid, they want 5 years with the bank statements, okay? And everything. Life insurance statements, bank statements, tax returns, everything. So people who throw out this stuff, don't. Keep it for at least 5 years. or have access to it online if you don't keep it, because they're going to want that. They want 5 years worth of everything. And typically it depends on the county, but they're going to look at any transfers over $2,000. Say, well, you know what? I pay my property taxes every year. And we know in New York, your property taxes can be anywhere from $10,000 to $55,000, $60,000, $70,000. Well, that's fine. That's not an uncompensated transfer, but you have to provide proof. Here's the canceled check to the taxing authority, and here's my tax bill. Fine, no problem. What they're looking at is uncompensated transfers. But remember, any transfer, some counties 2,000, some counties 3,000, they're going to look at. And by the way, if it's under 2,000 or 3,000, if they see a continuing pattern every month, they may ask for that backup if it's under their normal limit. But you have to have the backup. So things you shouldn't do: pay caregivers cash, pay contractors and people doing work on your house cash. You want to have bills, you want to have receipts, you want to have everything, right? Do everything if you want to back up your expenses, do it by check, do it by credit card, have the receipts, right? Because if not, they're going to assume that this is an uncompensated transfer and you get a penalty. What's the penalty? Okay, well, let's say, we'll go down to my example here. There's a perfect way to do it, okay? Let's assume there was a gift of $130,000. People think of gift tax exemptions, you give 15, nothing to do with that. You gave a gift of $130,000 over 5 years to one of your kids, okay? They're able to go, okay, over 5 years, you gave them $130,000. They're gonna say, and you live in New York City. New York City, they're gonna use the number of $13,037. They're gonna take $130,370 divided by this, they're gonna come up with a 10-month penalty period. So what it means is no Medicaid for you for 10 months. After 10 months, the Medicaid will kick in, all right? So that's how they calculate it. Now, there's different rules with married couples. I shouldn't say different rules because the same rules I just said apply. However, the married person in New York, they're allowed money. They're allowed additional income for a little under $3,300. They're allowed to keep up to $130,000. And they could file something called a spousal refusal. And if they file a spousal refusal, it's just, I'm not supporting my spouse, that's all it is. Then Medicaid must provide benefits to the spouse in the nursing home, and they can come after the spouse at home, but they have to provide benefits, okay? And remember, we talked about this penalty period. There's no transfer penalty period between spouses. So you could transfer stuff to your wife the day before you have to file a Medicaid application. It's fine, okay? And we said there's like that exemption too on penalty for transferring to a caretaker child. It's one of the ones of a house. Well, my son lives in Connecticut. I live in the Bronx. No good. My son lives in the second floor of a 3-family house. Great, you can transfer the son to your house. The house to your son, not the son to your house. The house to your son. You're allowed to do that. Okay, so these are ways of getting this. Once again, like I said, you could probably imagine it gets very complicated.
Thank you so much for listening to our video. If you have any questions about the information that you've heard today, please don't hesitate to contact the law offices of Joseph A. Marra. They are experts in what they do and more than willing to help you get the right strategies in place so that your estate planning makes sense and that it works the way you need it to. Thank you so much, and we'll look forward to hearing from you.